Am I right in thinking everybody's camera has gone off then?
Well, it looks like it.
Okay.
I did see Mum. When me and Mum were on, I saw your Mum.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what happened, but
I can see Dharamveer Prabhu and Baula Mataji.
Oh, I can't even see them.
So Dharmabir, you can sort out our cameras.
I don't know whether there's some permission required, but my browser has given permission to access the camera. Anyway, doesn't matter. We can just do it via audio otherwise.
Yeah, audio.
Okay, should we make a start?
Yes, please.
Okay,
Yes.
then. Right. So, Hare Krishna. Sorry, we have a lot of background noise here. Hope everybody is well. So, just to kind of explain what we kind of decided to do is, obviously, we are still very much thinking of His Holiness Bhaktichara Maharaj and the huge void he has left. But rather than do a remembrance program, which was the original idea, obviously, lots of different Sangha groups, lots of different people have done remembrance programs. So what we decided was to just continue with our Sangha as normal, simply because I think in kind of Maharaj's mood, he would have wanted us to continue preaching. And I'm sure devotees have had many opportunities to remember Maharaj and to speak fondly of him. But we will give that opportunity at the end of the Sangha as well, I think. If people do still want to speak something, that's absolutely fine. But we thought best to kind of, what do they say, like keep the show going, so to speak, and continue with our Sangha. I hope that's okay with everyone. Haribol?
Yeah, sorry, I had mine on mute.
That's fine. Okay.
That's absolutely fine.
No problem, sorry. So, yes, there will be an opportunity, of course. But if I can humbly request, we will attempt to sing Kirtan. I know the one thing that the lockdown has taught us is that doing remote Kirtan is really difficult. We will try. And then we'll speak from the Bhagavad Gita. Namo Vishnu Padaya Krishna Pristaya Bhutale Srimati Bhakti Vedanta Swami Bhakti Namine Haribol. Everybody, please chant. Namaste Arastive Gauravani Pracharine Nirvishesha Shanyavadi Paschatya Desha Shiva Sadgura Bhakta Vrinda Haribol Jaya Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Haribol, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare
There's no cameras working. It's all
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare
How are you doing anyway?
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare, Hare
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama
Rama, Hare Hare,
Hare.
Jaya Radha Gokulananda, Radha Gokulananda Radhe, Jaya Radha Gokulananda, Radha Gokulananda Radhe, Jaya Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman, Jaya Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman, Jaya Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman, Jaya Sitaram Lakshman Hanuman, Jaya Gauranikai, Jaya Gauranikai, Jaya Gauranikai, Jaya Gauranikai, 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 Jaya Gauranikai, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada, Jaya Prabhupada, 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 Jaya Jaya Prabhupada. Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Nitai Gaur Hari Bol, Hari Bol. जय श्री श्री राधा गोकुलानंद की, सीताराम लक्ष्मण हनुमान की, श्री श्री नित्याय गौरंग की, जय जगत गुरु शिला प्रभुपाद की, जय नित्याय गौर प्रेमानंदे। Okay, Hare Krishna. Hope everybody
Hare Krishna.
is well in this difficult time. Somehow or another, I always keep kind of thinking about how, generally speaking, technology causes kind of more problems than it solves. But this is like an interesting time where actually we're using technology to actually connect devotees and people together. Well, my son screams his head off. So we're going to be reading from Bhagavad Gita, chapter 4, verse 2, continuing our study of the 30 key verses. So we'll try and read as best as we can, and if everyone can please repeat after me, and then we'll go into the translation purport, and go into the study of the verse itself. So let's see how we do. Evam parampara praptam. If everyone wants to try, okay, you can repeat yourselves, or you can unmute and repeat afterwards. I don't mind. Let's see how we go. Evam parampara praptam.
Evam parampara praptam.
Thank you. Imam Rajasya Vidho.
Imam rajarsa.
they can say few people job. But
Okay, let's focus on Krishna Katha, everybody, please. Let's try again from the beginning. Evam parampara praptam.
Evam parampara praptam.
Thank you. Imam Rajasya Vidho.
Imam rajarsayo viduhu.
Sakalena hamantaha.
Sakale neha mahata.
Yogo nasta parantapa.
Yoga
Evam parampara praptam.
Evam parampara praptam.
Evam parampara praptam.
Evam parampara praptam.
Imam Rajasya Vidho.
Imam rajarsayo viduhu.
Imam Rajasya Vidho.
Imam Rajasayo Vidu.
Sakalene hamantaha. Sorry.
Kalene Mahata.
Thank you. So I was pronouncing the last word of that line wrong. Sakalene hamahata.
Kalene Mahata.
Yogo nasta parantapa.
Yogo Nasta Parantapa.
Yogo nasta parantapa.
Yogo Nasta Parantapa.
Thank you. Prabhujis, anybody?
Evam parampara praptam.
Evam Parampara Praptam.
Imam rajarsayo viduhu.
Imam Rajasayo Vidu.
Sakale neha mahata.
Neha Mahata.
Yogo nashtaha parantapa.
Yogo Nasta Parantapa.
Are there any other Prabhujis on the call?
Anil Prabhu. Anil Prabhu is on call.
Okay. Anil Prabhuji, would you like to try? Okay. Vaishnavis?
I'll have a go.
Thank you, Matthew.
Evam Parampara Praptam.
Evam
Parampara
Praptam.
Imam Rajasayo Viduhu.
Imam rajarsayo
Sakale Neha Mahata.
sakale neha mahata.
Yogo Nasta Parantapa.
Yogo nashtaha parantapa.
Thank you. Vaishnavis, anybody else?
Okay, shall I go?
Yeah,
Yes,
please.
please.
Evam parampara praptam.
evam paramparam
imam rajar rishaya vidu
evam rajidu
sakalena iha mahata
sakalena mahata
yoga nasta parantapa.
yogo nashta
Okay, so evam,
evam
evam
thus,
das
da
parampara,
parampara
para
by disciplinic succession,
by disciplic succession
succession
praptam, received. Sorry. Imam,
imam
evam
this science,
this
this
science
time
Rajarashayaha,
Raja
Rajarashaya
the saintly kings,
the saintly king
Viduhu,
viduha
understood,
understood
understood
Saha,
saha
that knowledge,
that
that
knowledge
knowledge
Kalena,
Kalena
in
in the course of time,
in the course
in
of time
course of time
Iha,
Eha
in this world,
in this world
Mahata,
Mahata
maha
great,
great
Yogaha,
yoga
yoga
the science of one's relationship
the science of
science
one's
of one's
relation
relationship
with the
with
Supreme,
with the
the
Supreme
supreme
Nastaha,
Nastaha
scattered,
Skat
cat
Parantapa,
Parantapa
pratapa
O Arjun,
o are
subduer of the enemies.
subduer of the
subduer
enemy
of the enemy.
Okay, translation and purport by His Divine Grace, A.C. Bhaktivedanta Swami Srila Prabhupada. Srila Prabhupada ki.
Jai.
Yeah.
Right. So let's see how we go. Right. Sorry, one moment. Dharmadeva Prabhu,
Yes,
would you
Prabhu.
mind reading the translation and purport, please?
Sure, thank you.
Thank you. So I'll be back in one moment.
Sure.
Thank you, Prabhu.
Translation. This supreme science was thus received through the chain of disciplic succession, and the saintly kings understood it in that way. But in course of time the succession was broken, and therefore the science as it is appears to be lost. Purport. It is clearly stated that Gita was especially meant for the saintly kings because they were to execute its purpose in ruling over the citizens. Certainly, Bhagavad Gita was never meant for the demonic persons who would state its value for no one's benefit and would devise all types of interpretations according to personal whims. As soon as the original purpose was scattered by the motives of the unscrupulous commentators, there arose the need to establish the disciplic succession. 5,000 years ago, it was detected by the Lord Himself that the disciplic succession was broken, and therefore He declared that the purpose of the Gita appeared to be lost. In the same way, at the present moment also, there are so many editions of the Gita, especially in English, but almost all of them are not according to authorized disciplic succession. There are innumerable interpretations rendered by different mundane scholars, but almost all of them do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead Krishna, although they make a good business on the words of Shri Krishna. This spirit is demonic because demons do not believe in God but simply enjoy the property of the Supreme. Since there is a great need of an edition of the Gita in English as it is received by the Parampara in bracket disciplic succession system, an attempt is made herewith to fulfill this great want. Bhagavad Gita, accepted as it is a great boon to humanity, but if it is accepted as a treatise of philosophical speculations, it is simply waste of time. Thank you, Prabhu. Madhurananda Prabhu, over to you.
Thank you. Sorry, just trying to keep Harry happy as well. Okay, so another very interesting verse, continuing our study of the 30 key verses. So this verse establishes the parampara system. And what's interesting is actually this verse for me is kind of like a two-part verse. The previous verse actually outlines the parampara in a little bit more detail in terms of what it means. But then in this verse, it's established as to how the system works, more so than kind of who. Sorry, one moment. Sorry about that. So yeah, it establishes in a bit more detail as to how the system works. So there's a lot we can discuss, but there's 2 points I wanted to focus on. So the first one was actually about the way that this information is passed down, and the relevance it has actually to saintly kings. Because for me, that was quite an interesting point. I have to kind of give a bit of a weird example. My mum will understand why. But how many of you know the TV show Star Trek? Bit of a weird example to begin with, but I'm not ashamed to say I'm a fan of science fiction. But something interesting happens on that show. For those who don't know, it's basically about a group of people in space on a spaceship going on adventures. But there's like a pivotal scene that happens in almost every single episode. The crew as a team will encounter something that they've never seen before. And the captain is sitting in the middle of the ship and he's surrounded by all these different officers who are experts in different things. There's like a logistics officer, a science officer, a tactical officer. And what the captain will do is he will speak to virtually all of them and say, okay, well, what do you think that is? What do the sensors say? What readings do we have? And then once he's gathered that information, then he'll make a choice as to what to do. So the idea is that the saintly kings work the exact same way. We see it commonly if you've seen like TV shows of the Mahabharata or the Ramayana, that the kings are surrounded by a court. And within that court, there are many, many brahmanas, but also other people as well, Vaishyas, other kings. And the king would take guidance and take the advice from lots of different people before effectively making a decision. Now, the reason this is really important is that this doesn't actually happen so much today. Instead, the leaders, or as Prabhupada often would point out, the so-called leaders, feel that they are experts in everything and therefore don't need to take guidance. I was reading recently, it was really fascinating how in the midst of this pandemic that we're facing at the moment, how different countries dealt with this. So on one hand, the World Health Organization was presenting information as to what we should do in order to keep ourselves protected. And some countries took this advice straight away and implemented it. Some countries had their own kind of medical teams that would gather information and then advise the president or prime minister. And in some countries, even though the health officials said that this is the best guidance, this is what we recommend, the leaders decided to do something completely different. So one instance was, I believe it was New Zealand, if I remember correctly. It was either New Zealand or Canada, but the way that they handled it was basically the leaders of the country approached their medical team straight away and said, you tell us what to do. Whatever you feel is the best guidance, we will put that into place straight away. There's not going to be any discussion. So this is an interesting point just about the quality of leaders in general, is that a leader is not supposed to know everything, right? It's not the job of a leader to know everything, but the leaders are the ones who can make good decisions. So a good leader knows to take information and guidance from, many relevant places. In fact, one of the qualities of a good leader is they know when to take guidance and who to take guidance from. The wonderful example is there of King Bali when Vamanadev enters his court, and his supposed guru, Shukracharya, tells him that this boy is Krishna, do not give him what he's asking for. So Bali Maharaj, by his intelligence, understood that even though his guru is giving that instruction, he is now not a person to take guidance from, because he is giving something which is contradictory to scripture. Whereas we can see with examples like Dhritarashtra, how so many people were advising him different things, and yet he would kind of listen, in some cases not listen. So we also have to remember the same. It's actually a lesson for us as well, not just for the saintly kings. We must take guidance. We can't pretend for a second that we are like the Supreme Lord and we know everything. And we have to understand that we have to be good at taking that guidance and then knowing how to act on it. Another example comes to mind. Often, Srila Prabhupada would write many letters and give people seemingly contradictory advice. Many instances in his letters, he would write to a certain devotee and say, it is best that you don't get married. You need to join the ashram. But then a similar person, Srila Prabhupada, would instruct them, it is best that you get married and find somebody suitable to begin Grahastha ashram with. So the idea is that why is this the case? It's because Srila Prabhupada was expert at giving the right guidance to the right people. So we have to kind of understand and learn the same, that for us to be in any kind of leadership position, that doesn't mean we know everything. It means that just like the saintly kings, we have to understand how to take advice from the Brahmanas and then act on that advice correctly. You see, during the courts during Vedic times, it wasn't the case that the Brahmanas would tell the kings, here is what you must do, right? In fact, if you analyze the Bhagavad Gita, there's actually not many occasions where Krishna directly tells Arjun what to do. Mama Nusmaram Yudhyacha is one example. He tells Arjun directly to fight. But many times Krishna will present Arjun with a principle, right? Here is a principle for you to consider. And now based on this principle, you have to understand how to act. Sometimes the Bhagavad Gita is criticized in this way. Now people often say, well, why didn't Krishna just directly tell Arjun what to do? Why waste all this time on philosophy? There are other scriptures and other religions where direct instructions are given. You must do this, you must do this. 10 Commandments, for example, direct instructions. So why is Krishna not being direct? Well, the answer is actually quite simple. If I give you a direct instruction, you will know what to do for that specific circumstance. But if you understand a principle, you can apply that principle in multiple circumstances. So that's why it's really important that we understand why Krishna gives that information in the way that he does. An interesting question that was raised in a class many moons ago was, here Arjun is receiving the Bhagavad Gita, right? So was the Bhagavad Gita that, for example, the sun god received the exact same as what Arjun received? The sun god was not asked to fight. He was not on the battle of Kurukshetra, right? So what was the difference in the Bhagavad Gita that he received? So the answer that was given was that the Bhagavad Gita was the exact same in principle. The same principles were given, but Krishna tailored those principles to the needs of the person listening. In fact, Krishna is doing something that a very expert teacher can do. They can take the immediate circumstance and use that to explain principles, right? So many times, for example, like Srila Prabhupada will be talking to so many different people from so many different walks of life, but he was able to explain Krishna consciousness based on what that person was doing at that point in time, right? I remember hearing, for example, once Urmila Mataji was talking about her son, and he's a very wonderful book distributor. And he was speaking to one person in New York, and he simply stopped this person and started talking to them and said, like, what do you do? What's your business? And this person explained, oh, I'm an architect. I make buildings. And he immediately replied, wonderful. Do you know who the supreme architect is? And he began a conversation in that way, just from that principle. So this is something that Krishna does when he gives the Bhagavad Gita. So It's almost like a long introduction, actually, but it's where I want to begin our kind of discussion from. So then what happens from there? So the kings would take the principles that the Brahmins gave, and then based on their knowledge, their ability to understand those principles, they would then give instruction. So the instructions may change, but the principles don't. It's interesting to note also historically, as we understand from the Bhagavatam and beyond, that there were times when the Kshatriyas basically thought they knew better. And as a result, they thought they knew better than the Brahmanas, and so they kind of gave their own instruction, right? So we understand, for example, Parashuram then comes in this way to stop this behavior from happening. But then later on through time, the Vaishyas also overthrow the Kshatriyas. So if we look at things like the French Revolution, for example, many countries disbanded their monarchy, basically because the monarchy had all the wealth, and the Vaishyas didn't like that. So in many circumstances in different countries and points in history, the ruling class were overthrown by the Vaishyas, the working class, so as to kind of gain control. And then what do we see now? Effectively, the Shudras are now overthrowing the Vaishyas, right? So even in this sort of time, because of this economic crisis, so many shops and things are beginning to close. But we often hear this phrase like the customer is always right. And we see even politically, because the Vaishyas have the kind of order of rule, they elect one of their own to be president. Prabhupada made this point. So it's very important for us as a matter of duty that we establish this Brahminical order. And the Brahminical order's job is to give people spiritual principles and to educate them onto how to apply them in their day-to-day life. Right? It's not enough that we know the Gita and that we can preach the Gita. We have to be able to give the Gita in such a way that a person listening knows how to apply it based on where they are. It's very, very important because that's what the Brahmanas would do. This next point I wanted to bring up, separate to this, is how Srila Prabhupada is mentioning that there are so many different forms of the Gita. So Krishna in the verse talks about how the disciplinic succession was broken and then the science appears to be lost. So what does he mean by that? It's not that people forgot the Bhagavad Gita, it's that people misinterpreted the Bhagavad Gita. That's the problem. So the issue that came about was that people were giving their own understanding of the Bhagavad Gita, their own spin on the Bhagavad Gita, their own translation for means other than what the Bhagavad Gita actually was. Now, we have to kind of, for a moment, kind of stop and think about why this is the case. Why did people do this? Well, it's because the Bhagavad Gita is so potent, right? It is so potent that when it's received purely and when people understand it clearly, it is very powerful and it has a direct effect, which is to allow somebody to interact directly with the Supreme Lord. However, because of this potency, people can twist this potency to their means. Now, this isn't the fault of the Bhagavad Gita, right? Principles can be applied correctly and incorrectly. It's not the case that just because a principle is given, um, it will always work. It can be used in a wrongful way. For example, we see many, many times now, even in immediate history, there are many, many people who use religion and apply the principles of religion for wrongful means. You know, in the name of God, they harm people. In the name of God, they offend people. So it's not always the case simply that just because a spiritual principle is given, it can always be executed directly. It's actually super important that we educate people in how to apply them based on what they're doing. And we have to understand that this is the case. So this is what Krishna means when he says that the knowledge from the Bhagavad Gita was lost. It's not lost, so to speak. It has been misinterpreted and therefore changed, and therefore the disciplinic succession is broken. So a question that we can ask ourselves is, okay, well, if that's the case, how do we know our disciplinic succession is not broken? Right? How do we know our disciplinic succession is not broken? It's a question that we need to consider very seriously. Well, the first piece of evidence that we can present is that the lessons from the Bhagavad Gita, time after time, within at least the Gaudiya Vaishnava tradition, have not changed. So, for example, within our disciplinic succession, you will not find a leader who will present that Krishna is not God. Right? None of our leaders in our disciplinic succession will present the point that Krishna is not the Supreme Lord. In other traditions, they do present that. They present that Krishna as an ordinary person. He's merely an avatar. I've even read some translations of the Bhagavad Gita that say that effectively Krishna is not even a real person, but he represents a set of ideas or morals that we have to try to understand. The second point is within our disciplinic succession, you will never see any principle higher than that of bhakti. So in other principles, they emphasize that, for example, gyan is more important, or karma is more important, or even simple philanthropy is more important. I remember many, many years ago, my dad showing me one small, like a pocketbook of the Bhagavad Gita, and it basically was a set of business principles, how to get ahead in business, how to lead correctly, how to maximize your profits, etc., but based on principles of the Bhagavad Gita. So what we can at least say with 100% certainty is our message is consistent, right? So yes, we can argue that there are some differences in understanding. We can understand that there have been obviously Srila Prabhupada requesting changes to the book so we can understand them better, but the core message is the same. And for all of our teachers, as we go back in our line from the Supreme Lord to Srila Prabhupada and beyond, that message is consistent. One of the things you can even try to understand or even analyze is if you look at the same thing in different traditions, where they're analyzing the Bhagavad Gita, where they're presenting principles, the core message will often change. Sometimes Krishna is God, sometimes he isn't. Sometimes he's a normal person. Bhakti is higher. Being a good person is higher. Simply reading the Bhagavad Gita is important. No, it should just be worshipped and not read. Actually, it shouldn't be touched. Actually, it should be touched by everyone. These things will change. But our core message remains the same. And for one who is not sure about the core message of the Bhagavad Gita, I would encourage you to read the introduction to the Bhagavad Gita. There, Srila Prabhupada very clearly establishes what the core message of the Bhagavad Gita is. Going into even the translation for the first few verses of the first chapter, there, Srila Prabhupada makes very, very clear the message of the Bhagavad Gita, and that message still rings true today, and it is the same message that we can read going back in the Gaudiya Vaishnava line. Last point I wanted to mention on this before we take some questions was a sentence that really stood out to me in the purport, and that is where Srila Prabhupada points out that a demon is one who uses, what was the point? Uses the Lord's belongings for, I don't have the Gita in front of me, sorry, I had to move to a different room, but what is the sentence, if somebody can tell me, that a demoniac person is someone who enjoys the Lord's property? It's something along those lines. Can somebody remind me? Anybody? I don't mind, don't be shy.
This spirit is demonic because they are basically saying that they do not accept the Supreme Personality of Godhead, Krishna, although they make a good business on the words of Sri Krishna. So this spirit is demonic because demons do not believe in God, but simply enjoy the property of the Supreme.
That's the one. Yeah. So this point I thought was super interesting. Often, like especially at the moment where we've had time to kind of spend more time with our kids at home, and we're trying to educate them more in Krishna consciousness. We'll often kind of think about when we portray demons to them, and we'll do these things of like demons are these big horrible creatures, and you have your like Trinavarta and Putana and all these different people, and we present these as demons, right? But what does the Bhagavad Gita say? It says that actually that's not the right understanding of a demon. The divine and demoniac chapter in the Bhagavad Gita explains that it is just a difference in mentality, right? It's just a difference in mentality. Is it the pastime of, I'm going to probably get the name wrong, Vritasura, who was created by, um, who was the Brahmin?
Indra, by Indra.
And not, he wasn't created by Indra. Indra killed one Brahmin.
Yeah.
And cut off his three heads, right? And then his father created this demon to kill Lord Indra. But because he didn't perform the mantras of the sacrifice correctly, he created a demon. But this demon was a devotee,
Yeah.
right? It's a demonic body, demonic form, but his mentality was that of a devotee, right? So the only thing that separates us and the demons is basically our mentality. And here is an indicator, right? Very powerful indicator. Are we enjoying the property of the Lord? Are we enjoying the property of the Lord? Now, I found this really interesting Because let's analyze what this statement means. So, for example, does that mean we shouldn't enjoy anything? Because if we are enjoying anything, that means we're enjoying the property of the Lord. So you're at the moment, like I'm sitting in a room and I can see the sunshine. It's a beautiful day outside. Oh no, I'm enjoying the property of the Lord because the sunshine's not mine. The trees outside are not mine, right? My children sometimes bring me joy. So am I enjoying the property of the Lord? So does that mean we should have no enjoyment? No, it doesn't mean that at all. Actually, Krishna explains in the Bhagavad Gita that one of the measures of our devotional process, how do we know we're executing Krishna consciousness directly? Beg your pardon, correctly, is enjoyment. Krishna says this process is blissfully performed. Blissfully performed. So what does that mean? How do we kind of correlate these two statements? Well, it's simple in principle, again, very difficult in practice. It means that we do not enjoy separate to Krishna. We do not enjoy separate to Krishna. So yes, there are so many things in this world that bring us joy, and actually our Krishna conscious life should be joyful. But that joy, we should recognize, comes from the Supreme Lord. And we enjoy in connection with the Supreme Lord. The Lord is the source of that enjoyment, not separate to him. So if we are able to connect the things that we enjoy to Krishna, then we are not enjoying separate to the Lord. Okay? That doesn't mean, however, that we try to somehow dovetail our enjoyment just so we can stick part of it to the Lord so it's for us to enjoy. The higher principle is that actually we're only interested in Krishna's enjoyment, right? We're only interested in Krishna's enjoyment. There's a simple analogy given
Before,
that.
sorry, Madhurananda Prabhu, I really please forgive me for interruption.
Mhm.
Before it may cut off suddenly any
Oh,
minute, and we will rejoin following the second link if it happens. It will
no
not cut
problem.
anymore. Thank you.
Thank you for the reminder, Prabhu. Yeah, sorry, I didn't realize how long I was speaking for. Please forgive me. So when a wedding is arranged, right, everybody is interested in creating a nice situation for the husband and wife to be, right? So they want everything to be perfect so that they have a nice wedding ceremony. But in doing that, everybody enjoys themselves. So if the bride and groom have a nice wedding and everything goes well and they are satisfied, everybody enjoys themselves. So actually, if we're able to focus our attention on trying to please Krishna and make Krishna the center of that enjoyment process, if we focus our enjoyment on trying to do the things that Krishna likes to make Krishna happy, actually we also become happy. This is the highest form of enjoyment. So we have to try to kind of apply our enjoyment, our happiness in such a way that it is being done for Krishna's pleasure. And if it's done correctly in that way, then actually we will kind of also experience that. So those are the three main points that I wanted to bring up. So the first one was that to understand the position of the saintly kings in the way that knowledge is passed down in order to teach us how to be good leaders. The second was to understand why the Bhagavad Gita becomes misinterpreted and to establish our role in what we should be doing in teaching people and educating people on the knowledge of the Bhagavad Gita. And the third was to analyze this point of demonic mentality in relation to enjoying the property of the Lord and to get us to understand how to actually enjoy ourselves in connection with Krishna. Okay, there's much more we could talk about, but I will stop there. So I will say, Brantaraj Shrimad Bhagavad Gita ki,
Jai,
Srila Prabhupada ki,
jai,
Jainata Gaura Premanande.
Hari Hari Bol.
So, Dharmabir Prabhu, is it a good idea if we join the other call and take questions, or should we
Sure.
take?
Yeah, I think that would be better. I think rather than
No,
facing the sudden disconnection.
no problem. Okay, so if I can humbly request everybody, please to go to the WhatsApp message that Dharmabir Prabhu so kindly posted, and if I can humbly request everybody to join the second group, and then we'll take questions there. Thank you. Hare Krishna.